month away from one of the most exciting football days of the year. We got Joel Klatt here to get us ready. Joel is Fox's lead college football analyst, knows this stuff inside and out. So much so, he recently sat down, ranked his top 50 players ahead of the draft. Here's a look at his top 10, highlighted, respectively, by Trevor Lawrence. There it is right there. We're going to dive in. Joel, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let me start here. So you sit down, you put together your top 50, you take a step back, you look at it. What was your biggest takeaway from just putting the whole list together?
Well, other than my eyes being tired from watching so much tape, and first of all, good morning. I think that there's a lot of depth in this draft. I really do believe that a lot of organizations, whether you need help on the offensive line, defensive line, or at the skill positions, namely wide receiver, I think that there's going to be a lot of players that become household names that are second and third round players. So this draft, to me, yes, we're going to talk about the top 10. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks quite a bit, but there's a really good depth aspect to this draft. And there's going to be some heavy contributors in the NFL for years to come that are taken in the second, third, and maybe even fourth round.
All right, Joel, B. Marshall here. Look, I got to push back on you a little bit, and I want to start here at the wide receiver position. That, that's my baby. That's what I've played my entire career. You got Devontae Smith at 3. So it's almost like I just want you to talk to me about the whole, the demographic of the wide receiver position, not just one guy, but you got Devontae at 3. Why is he at 3? And then tell me what else you're seeing at this position.
Well, I mentioned in the previous answer a lot of depth at this position, right? I think that a lot of these guys are great players. Now, here's what's so fascinating is Brandon, Devontae had one of the great, if not the greatest wide receiver season that we've ever seen, right? And I voted for him for the Heisman. I pushed for him to win the Heisman Trophy as a wide receiver, which, as you know, is very rare. And at the same time, it was a bit of circumstance that put him into that position. Remember, Jalen Waddle, his teammate, was having a better year at the point that Jalen Waddle got injured. Jamar Chase, who was the Blitnikoff Award winner the prior year, was the best wide receiver in college football and chose to opt out. So all of a sudden, Devontae Smith was, by circumstance, kind of the best wide receiver out there in college football. And this by no means diminishes what he is or what he can do in the NFL. I think he's a top pick. I think he's going to be electric. I think that he can take the top off the defense, obviously, with his speed, like we saw week in and week out in college football. But when you look at those other two guys, there's a bit more size, there's a bit more physicality. Jamar Chase does everything well. He separates in tight quarters. He catches the ball well in 50-50 spots. Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in this draft. I think he's going to get taken in the top 5. So taking nothing away from Devontae Smith, who's going to be a top pick and a heavy contributor, I just think that those other two guys were a little bit better, mainly because of their size. Devontae Smith and his slight nature, his slight frame, concerns me a little bit, although, like I said, I think he's going to be a great player.
Joel, I want to go to the quarterbacks. Seemingly, nearly everyone agrees and has agreed for a few years now that Trevor Lawrence is the #1 quarterback in this class, and so we can leave that there. It seemed like most people agreed Justin Fields was the second best. And then over the last couple months, more often than not, I see Zach Wilson projected as the second quarterback taken, with Justin Fields dropping to the third quarterback, and in some places the fourth quarterback taken behind Trey Lance, as well as Zach Wilson. You kept Justin Fields at 2, or you have Justin Fields second best quarterback. Why do you like him, and what do you think there is making some people put Zach Wilson ahead of him?
Well, I don't want to be a victim of teardown culture, if you want to say it that way. Yeah. And it happens all the time. And this is not a huge knock, but it's easy to knock Justin Fields because he's been at the mountaintop for 2 straight years, and been one of the best players in college football. Now, are there some holes in his game? Yes. And we can talk about that ad nauseum. But What becomes in vogue is taking somebody that a lot of people don't know about, like a Trey Lance, and haven't seen a lot of football from him, or a Zach Wilson from BYU, and elevating him. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to be a victim of the now, and I want to make sure I'm taking in the entire picture. Justin Fields is a tremendous player, guys. He threw for a high percentage. This guy is highly competitive. He's accurate. He's got a great deep ball. He can push the ball down the field, drive it down the field. He was the best athlete on the field every single time I saw him play. And let's not also minimize the fact that he's an unbelievable leader. Remember, one of the big reasons why we even had football in the Big Ten in particular was because of the leadership of Justin Fields. So he's an alpha. He's a QB1. And I don't want to take any of that away from him because in a couple of games he held onto the football. He held onto the football, a little too long. Now, did he at times? Yes. But I think that can be worked out in development. He developed incredibly well during the course of his time under Ryan Day. So for me, he's my second quarterback on the board. And Zach Wilson, who's a great player, remember now, they didn't play a Power 5 opponent this year. This was his best year by far. He was a bit of a one-year wonder, and they didn't play anybody. So when you're playing Jones Junior High School with a great offensive line in front of you, I don't want to tear down Justin Fields, who was at the pinnacle of college football, just because he held onto the football against Northwestern, right? So I don't want to be a victim of terror. It happens all the time, by the way, Nick, when we're talking about the Heisman Trophy. What is it easy to do in college football every fall? You take the favorite, and then you start tearing them down, and then you're just left with whoever at the end to vote for the Heisman Trophy. We shouldn't fall into that in the draft prospects.
Joel, talk about a guy we saw a lot. Mac Jones had a great year, but when you see him, it's like, you see people knocking, like, I don't know, he's got a bunch of pros around him. He's got Nick Saban, had a great offensive line. So it feels like he gets hit and moves down. Was it challenging to grade out Mac Jones and how he's going to perform when he's surrounded by so much talent at Alabama?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a concern, right? And you know who I talked about this with, and I think it's fascinating. I talked a lot during the course of the year with Matt Leinart about this, because that was the knock in hindsight on Matt, is that, he was surrounded by great players in college, and maybe that wasn't a great translation into the National Football League. But Mac specifically, here's where I fall on Mac. I love Mac's game. Love it. He's efficient. He's accurate with the football. He throws one of the best touch passes I've seen in a long time. And he knows what he's doing. You watch his eyes. He's manipulating the defense. I call it controlling the game from the pocket, right? There's a lot a quarterback can do that's not just throwing the football. He's controlling the game from the pocket, changing protections, changing the run play, getting everybody into the right positions. And then he's manipulating the defense during the course of the play, during the course of the snap, in order to open up areas of the field where his team can exploit. That's really graduate level stuff at the college level. And so I think Max is a great player. Now, here's where you land with Mac Jones. I think his floor is really high. What you see is what you get, and I think it's really good, and I think he can start in the NFL. Now, does he have the top-end skill set that you get from Lawrence or Wilson or Fields or even Trey Lance? Probably not. So it's a little bit lower of a ceiling, but a really high floor. You know what you're going to get. I think middle of the first round to back end of the first round is where he's going to land, and I think whoever drafts him is going to be incredibly happy.
Joel, I know we don't have a ton of time here, but I feel like the story of the last 10 days in the draft process has been Kyle Pitts, the freakish tight end. Here's my only, he's going to probably go as the highest any tight end's gone in the draft since the last super freak tight end, Vernon Davis. And maybe it's unfair. I look at, my concern is the last guy I saw jump off the page at me athletically at that position was Vernon Davis. And Vernon Davis had a nice career, but probably underachieved given what people thought when they took him 6th overall. What are the pros and cons of Kyle Pitts to you?
Well, I think Kyle's an outstanding player, and I think that he can impact in the NFL right away. The one thing that I think about when I watch Kyle is I don't feel like I'm watching a tight end who's very athletic. I feel like I'm watching a really big wide receiver who can split out. And can he go in line? Yeah, kind of, but he fits the modern day NFL more so than maybe just some big tight end who you can put out there and throw the football to who's very good as a pass catcher. This guy affects the field in every single single area, which not every tight end does. You can put him out one-on-one, and in particular in a 3-by-1 set or in some sort of isolation set, and he can beat corners, he can beat safeties, he can beat linebackers. So he's a matchup issue in that spot. He can operate in the middle of the field, so he's a great red zone target. And then he is wonderful at the catch point. He's smooth through the ball. You know, he's not just a physical beast. This guy has all the traits that a great wide receiver would have. That smoothness that you want. He gets separation. He's got great hands. So from my seat, I think he's a little better receiver than Vernon Davis was when he came out. Are all the physical, you know, freakish things there? Yes, absolutely. But Nick, I think he's more polished when you're talking about a down the field threat.
Okay.
All right, Joel, B. Marsh here again. The QB1 thing, Nick doesn't want to talk about it on our show. He doesn't like us saying QB1, QB2. So let's stay right here. We got Kellen Mond. This is a guy that can come in, be a QB2, and can emerge as a QB1 and light the league on fire. So I'm bringing him up because I want to know how far off I am or if I'm spot on. Can he be the steal of the draft? That's what I've been saying for months now.
Well, you never know. Now, this is what, and I think you'll agree with me on this. When you get past some of the top quarterbacks, and they even sometimes fall into this, but I think, listen, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be an independent success, right? Regardless of where he goes. So even at Jacksonville, I think he's going to succeed. That isn't the case for everybody, right? So when you talk about those guys that could be a steal later in the draft, in particular at quarterback, Brandon, I think it really matters where they go, who their coaching staff is, and what that fit is. So for him, I think it all has to do with fit. He's played a lot of football for Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. I don't think they protected him all that well. At times he can be